Let's fill out a 2024 US Senate map based on the latest odds via Polymarket. Now, Republicans enjoy a fundamental edge on this map, as Democrats must defend 23 of the 34 Senate seats up for election this November. That includes 8 of the 10 most competitive races and 3 seats in states that Trump won in both 2016 and 2020. That being said, there is still a question as to whether the GOP can get the job done. Their chances of flipping the majority sit at 74%, or roughly a 3 in 4 chance. And those odds hinge on just a couple of key races, as even if Republicans do flip the majority, it's unlikely to be by a comfortable margin. Now, in today's video, I will be assigning a rating to every single race, and that will be driven by the prediction markets, which have proven themselves incredibly accurate in recent cycles, even more accurate than the polls on many occasions. Let's begin with the solid seats, where either party has a better than 95% chance of winning. In other words, Republicans and Democrats don't have to waste too many resources in these states, as I expect either party will hold these races by more than 10 percentage points each. Starting with the safe Democrat states, down the Pacific coast, we have Washington, California, and Hawaii. Four-term incumbent Maria Cantwell has a 98% chance of winning re-election in Washington, as does Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff in California, where he is almost certain to succeed LaFonza Butler, who herself was appointed to replace the late Dianne Feinstein, and then opted against running for a full term. And then finally, down in Hawaii, Mazie Hirono has a 99% chance of winning, as she received 71% of the votes in her last election in 2018, which was the largest share of the vote for a candidate of either party in that cycle. Back on our map, joining those safe blue states are Minnesota, New York, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Delaware. No surprise, in any of these deep blue Northeast states, Joe Biden should carry them all by wide margins at the top of the ticket. And there are currently no extenuating circumstances that would render the Senate races competitive. That said, Maine's presidential race could end up being somewhat close, though incumbent independent Angus King, who caucuses with Democrats in the Senate, has won both of his last 2 elections by more than 20 points each. Minnesota is also worth highlighting. Amy Klobuchar has a 97% chance of winning a 4th term. Now, she is a powerhouse here in Minnesota, having never won with less than 60% of the votes. So while the presidential race in Minnesota will probably be decided by single digits, she should win re-election by close to 20 points when all is said and done. Now, as for our safe Republican seats, North Dakota, Wyoming, and Utah, not much to note here other than the fact that Mitt Romney is retiring in Utah. He probably would have lost in the primary, considering that he did vote in favor of both impeachments against Trump, but nevertheless, Congressman John Curtis should cruise to succeed him, as Utah has not elected a Democrat to the Senate since the 1970s. Moving right along, both Nebraska's regular and special Senate elections are solid red, as are the southern states of Missouri, Tennessee, and Mississippi. And finally, we have West Virginia and Indiana in this column as well. Now, West Virginia is a flip for the GOP, with Democratic incumbent Joe Manchin's retirement and sitting Governor Jim Justice running as the GOP nominee. This might go down as one of the easiest pickups in American history, as both Trump and Justice should win West Virginia by something like 40 points. Alrighty, now that lifts the Republican total to 48 seats. That is 9 more than Democrats at 39. Goes to show just how much of a fundamental edge the Republican Party does have on this map, as they are already just 2 seats shy of the majority. That is, if Donald Trump defeats Kamala Harris in the presidential race, and thereby his Vice President J.D. Vance holds the tie-breaking votes. Yet even if Trump loses and Tim Walz holds that tiebreaker, the GOP would still only need to win 3 of the remaining seats to secure that majority. And among those remaining seats, 4 are in states that Trump won in the 2020 election: Montana, Ohio, Florida, and Texas. And that is especially noteworthy because split ticket voting is at a record low right now, meaning that fewer and fewer voters are voting for different parties for different offices. In 2020 alone, just 3 of the 33 Senate candidates deviated from their party's presidential nominee by more than 10 points. And right now, there are just 5 senators representing states won by the other party in 2020. One of those is Republican Susan Collins of Maine, who is the only senator elected in a state that was simultaneously won by the other party's presidential candidate since 2012. And to make matters even more difficult for Democrats, there are also 5 seats remaining in states that Joe Biden carried by less than 3 points in 2020, and where Kamala Harris currently either trails Trump in the polls or is leading by no more than 2 to 3 points herself. And those states are Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the core Rust Belt trio, and then Arizona and Nevada over here in the Southwest. On that note, let's now take a look at the likely races, where one candidate is heavily favored with an 85 to 95% chance of winning. Starting with Democrats, again, New Mexico, where 2-term Democrat Martin Heinrich has a 94% chance of winning, so it's right on the edge of being safe for the party. Now, Heinrich was reelected in 2018 with 54% of the votes in a 3-candidate race, with Libertarian Gary Johnson garnering 15%. And both polls here this cycle also show Heinrich with a strong advantage. He leads by 9.5 points right now on average. And then back on our map, up here in the Northeast region, there are 4 likely blue seats: Pennsylvania, yes, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, and Virginia. Starting in Virginia, incumbent Tim Kaine has a 94% chance of winning. Now, you might remember him as Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016, or you may not. He has led his Republican opponent, Hung Cao, by a comfortable margin in every single survey taken thus far. As for the state of New Jersey, incumbent Democrat Bob Menendez is going to jail on corruption charges, and the Democratic nominee, Congressman Andy Kim, is heavily favored to succeed him, also with a 94% chance of winning. Then in Maryland, Angela Brooks is favored with a 91% chance over former Governor Larry Hogan. Now, Maryland would normally be considered a solid blue seat, as it did vote for Joe Biden by more than 30 points in 2020. Yet with Hogan in the race, he did manage to win 2 statewide elections as a Republican in Maryland and left office with a near 80% approval rating. Those factors have forced Democrats to break a bit of a sweat here, although Brooks does still lead in the polls by almost 7 points on average. And then finally, Pennsylvania, the most important battleground on the presidential map, its Senate race is less interesting, with incumbent Bob Casey running for re-election. He has an 85% chance of winning right now, as he is arguably the strongest incumbent either party has. Since first being elected state auditor of Pennsylvania back in 1996, Casey has never lost a race by less than 9 percentage points. Now, as for the Republican Party, there are no likely states in their corner, as rather both Texas and Florida go in the lean Republican category. Here in Florida, former governor, now incumbent Republican Senator Rick Scott was first elected back in 2018 by the narrowest of margins. Yet he should win by a much more comfortable margin this November, just 2 years after the Florida GOP managed landslide victories in the 2022 gubernatorial and U.S. Senate elections. And that came after Florida voted nearly 8 points to the right of the nation as a whole in the 2020 presidential race, the furthest it had voted from the nation since 1988. Now, in terms of Senate polling, we do see Scott consistently leading Democrat Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, a former congresswoman, by an average of 4.3 percentage points right now. And as per Polymarket, Scott has an 83% chance of winning right now. It is closer to the likely territory than it is to tilt, which, by the way, for your reference, starts at 70%. Probabilities between 70 to 85% are lean, 55 to 70% tilt, and then less than 55% are toss-ups. As for the state of Texas, 2-term Republican incumbent Ted Cruz is running for a 3rd after he was most recently reelected by just 2.5 points in the 2018 midterms. That was against popular Democrat Beto O'Rourke. This was the closest Senate election in Texas since the 70s. Yet in spite of the Democratic Party's efforts to capitalize on that performance, Trump still carried Texas with 52% of the vote in 2020, which was almost identical to his vote share in 2016. And now here in 2024, according to presidential race polling, he is likely to win by a similar margin this November, roughly 5 percentage points. And as for the Senate race, Cruz actually leads by the exact same margin, 5%. As polling has narrowed in recent weeks. Leads of 10, 11, 13 points have dropped to more like 3, 4, and 8. Yet still, considering the fundamentals, Cruz still has an 84% chance of winning, according to Polymarket, as it would take a real collapse for Republicans to be in danger of losing either the presidential or Senate race here. Alrighty, now with those two states in the lean GOP column, the party is projected to win exactly 50 seats, which again would be enough to take control of the Senate if Trump also takes back the White House. Just 6 states remain, and they are all currently held by the Democratic Party: Montana, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio. Even if Harris holds the presidency for the Democratic Party, it would take a miracle for the party to sweep all 6 of these races and thereby maintain their majority. With that said, we'll go in order of likelihood of Democratic chances. So starting in Nevada, incumbent Democrat Jackie Rosen is running for a second term. She was first elected by 5 points in 2018, unseating then-incumbent Republican Dean Heller. Nevada is, of course, a key presidential battleground. Joe Biden carried it by 2% in 2020, and Kamala Harris currently leads Trump by less than half a point, 0.4%, per the Real Clear polling average. Republicans did manage to flip the governor's office in 2022 and came within a point of unseating Catherine Cortez Masto, the incumbent Democrat in that high-profile Senate race. And now in 2024, like Cortez Masto, Rosen does have a slight fundamental edge as the incumbent. She is reasonably popular and is expected to outperform Harris by at least a couple of points. Currently, she does lead her Republican opponent, Sam Brown, by 9 points on average, with the last 4 polls, all surveyed over the last month, ranging from +7 to +10. Now, her opponent, Brown, a U.S. Army veteran, is a pretty decent candidate for Republicans, but he has just yet to make any real headway, and that is reflected in the fact that Rosen has an 84% chance of winning on Polymarket. Again, almost in likely territory, but back on our map, it goes in the lean blue category. The next likeliest hold for Democrats comes right to the southeast in Arizona, which also leans blue. Democrat Ruben Gallego faces Republican Kari Lake. Now, this is another race in which Democrats have to feel good about, given the polling, as Gallego, a congressman representing Arizona's 3rd congressional district, does lead by 4.6% based on the latest 5 polls, all of which show him leading by at least 3 points. In the last 2 flagship polls via the New York Times and Emerson College show him up by 6 each. And going all the way back to January, the start of this year, Lake has yet to lead in a single survey. So it should come as no surprise that Gallego is also heavily favored on Polymarket with an 83% chance of winning right now. Arizona had for a long time been dominated by Republicans in statewide races, but Democrats have now won the last 3 U.S. Senate contests, plus the 2020 presidential race, where Biden carried Arizona's 11 electoral votes by 0.3%. Plus, of course, the 2022 gubernatorial election, where Kari Lake lost by just about half a percentage point. Next on our list is Wisconsin, a notoriously competitive presidential battleground, as 4 of the last 6 presidential races held here in the Badger State were each decided by less than a point. That includes both of the last 2, as Trump carried Wisconsin by 0.7% in 2016, before Joe Biden then flipped it back into the Democratic column by 0.6% in 2020. And now here in the 2024 Senate race, incumbent Democrat Tammy Baldwin will certainly benefit from that incumbency, as like Rosen, she should outperform Harris by a couple of points. Currently, she does lead her Republican opponent, Eric Hovde, in the polls by 4.6% right now, based on the last 7 polls. That is an identical overall margin to Gallego in Arizona. And again, according to Polymarket, Tammy Baldwin does have an 81% chance of winning. That is nearly identical to our next state, Michigan, where Alyssa Slotkin has an 80% chance here. Now, she is not the incumbent. She currently represents Michigan's 7th district in the House, but nevertheless, she does consistently lead in the polls, here by 4.8%. Her Republican opponent, former Congressman Mike Rogers, has also yet to lead in a single survey since last July. And it is also worth noting here that Michigan is the most fundamentally blue of the 5 dual presidential and Senate battlegrounds, as Joe Biden carried it by almost 3 points in 2020. It joins the others as a lean blue state here on our map. And that leaves us with just 2 seats to go. Along with West Virginia, they are 2 of the 3 Democratic-held seats in states that Trump won in 2020, Ohio and Montana. These are prime pickup opportunities for Republicans, as Democrats need both to have a shot at retaining their majority. Let's start in Ohio. For more than a century, it reigned supreme as the ultimate presidential bellwether state. The party that won Ohio won the White House in all but 3 election cycles between 1896 and 2020. But now the state has shifted hard to the right since the Obama years, voting for Donald Trump by 8 points in 2016 and in 2020, even as Democrats won the national popular vote in both elections. Perhaps the most dismal data point, though, of all for Democrats is the failed Senate candidacy of Congressman Tim Ryan in the 2022 midterms. He was widely considered to be the ideal candidate for the party to claim victory in that year's open Senate contest. Yet he lost by 6 percentage points to Trump's now running mate J.D. Vance. And now here in 2024, incumbent 3-term Democrat Sherrod Brown is running for re-election after he was re-elected in 2018 by 7 points. Now, Brown has thrived on his ability to win cross-party support, and the central question is whether Republican-leaning voters, who like Brown personally, will once again cast a vote in his favor, or will they revert to their preferred national party with Trump now headlining the top of the tickets? On the Republican side, car dealership owner Bernie Moreno claimed victory in the closely contested primary, thanks to Trump's endorsements, though Moreno was considered by most analysts as Republicans' weakest general election candidate, and he has trailed Brown in every single head-to-head poll. As things currently stand, Brown leads by roughly 3.5 percentage points, on average, over the last 3 polls, although I should note here that polling in Ohio has consistently underestimated the GOP in major statewide contests. Namely, Donald Trump outperformed 538's final average in Ohio by 6 points in 2016 and by 8 points in 2020, while Tim Ryan had led Vance for much of the 2022 cycle before, of course, he lost as well. Again, this race will come down to just how far ahead of Harris Brown can run, as Kamala will likely lose the state to Trump by around 8 to 10 points. Right now, it seems that traders are split on whether he can get the job done, as Brown and Moreno have equal 50-50 odds of winning right now. It's exactly a coin flip here, as we go ahead and place Ohio in the pure toss-up category here on our Senate map. Finally, let's wrap things up in Montana. Now, Republicans have secured each of the last 3 presidential races here by double digits, as Trump won it most recently by 15 in 2020. The Democratic Party's only saving grace here is the fact that 3-term incumbent Democrat Jon Tester is running to serve a 4th, and he is one of the most popular senators in the entire country. Yet again, with it being a presidential year, and Tester having never won a race by more than 5 points, you can obviously understand why this is the prime pickup opportunity for the Republican Party. They nominated retired Navy SEAL turned businessman Tim Sheehy, a relatively unproblematic candidate compared to some of the Republican nominees of the last few cycles, which actually makes things even more difficult for Tester. And with just about 5 weeks to go until Election Day, Sheehy leads by more than 5 points on average across the last 4 polls in Montana since the start of August. Now, it is true that Montana is not quite as red as Maryland is blue, but Tester will still probably have to outperform Harris by somewhere around 15 to 20 points. Not an impossible task, but again, it is becoming harder and harder with every passing cycle. And that is why traders on Polymarket give him just a 23% chance of winning, compared to Sheehy's 77%. So it's Tester with a roughly 1 in 4 chance of pulling this one out. And back on our map, Montana receives a lean Republican rating, bringing the party up to a presidential race-proof majority with 51 seats, leading Democrats at 48. I will, of course, be keeping a close eye on the polls in each of these lean blue states over the next few weeks as to whether the GOP candidate can climb back into the race. While on the other side, of course, for Democrats to have any chance at a majority, they will certainly need Tester to start turning things around quickly in Montana, or for something shocking to happen down in Texas or Florida, as even if they do hold Ohio, they would still fall short of a majority at 49 seats. As always, you can feel free to comment your thoughts and feelings about this map in the comment section below. I appreciate all positive or negative comments. Also, make sure to let me know what other 2024 related videos you would like to see in the future. Shout out to my channel members on screen here. Thank you so much for your support. If you'd like to become a member, go ahead and click the join button below this video to receive exclusive perks. Make sure to subscribe down below and please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. You can check out more content from my channel here, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.